Good evening, Bill.
Good evening. I put myself on mute.
I feel like putting myself on mute too. Well, welcome everyone.
Welcome.
The Project Opel was a concept largely headed up by Harley Earl. Morrisali was the engineer that drew up and designed the chassis with the 102-inch wheelbase for this sports car concept that General Motors was venturing into. I don't know that it was cut and dried, that it was going to be even a Chevrolet at that point. It may have been already decided by June of 1952, but Morrisali was, I believe, a Cadillac engineer, and he was presented this challenge, which he met, and they designed, or they built initially 852, 853, 854, 855, and 856. Those 5 chassis were built, and of those 5 chassis, only 3 of them were built into cars. 852, ultimately this car pictured, was the first one, and that was the Waldorf Astoria Motorama show car is what it's typically referred to. It's the first experimental Corvette. Then it was followed up by 856, which was the second one, and that was the test mule car. This is the document that caused a little bit of stir and shuffle on the build of these cars, because 856 was initially going to be Fisher test car, but it got reappropriated as to a proving grounds test car. 854 and 855, there's no documentation of those cars ever been finished up and built into automobiles. They needed a second show car, and that was this is 856, the second built experimental car, and it was the last of the 5 Opel series chassis. Now, this is the second 853 or EX53, the second show car that they got out on the circuit because they were spread too thin with that first one single 852 car. Now, there's a lot of documents here. There's this document is talking about 856 being kind of ugly out and about on the proving grounds. They wanted to make the appearance a little more presentable for guests, so they arranged to put a body swap together, and they were trying to decide as to which body they should use for the test car. And they had the choice of 852 or 853, but Mr. Primo wanted to make certain that they had a car to conduct a burn test with, and 852 was the one that was chosen for the burn test. They were going to try and launch an extensive checkout program to see damage on 852 or 853, which would be the best body to use for the 856 test car. I hope I don't confuse everybody with all of these numbers, because it gets a little bit of convoluted and kind of tough to follow. These documents that you're looking at here, they were published in the Corvette Restorer magazine in the summer of '93. John Abworth put together a marvelous composition entitled "The Early Corvettes," the earliest Corvettes. It is This particular issue right here, I don't know how many of you have seen it, studied it, and read it. It's such good information in this particular story.
We actually sent that out to the members, that the PDF version of that.
Oh, no, okay,
So they
okay.
should- They should have access to that.
Beautiful. This particular document is worth reading multiple times. Every time I read through it, and I don't know how many times I've read through it, I see something new that I've missed. At any rate, it covers the history of how Corvette was initially put together and designed. There's a, let's see what our next. This is 856 as it's out on the test track initially. As you can see, there's no exterior trim on the car. It's pretty crude and coarse in its body design and layout. It's got the small dog dish hubcaps on there. Each of these cars, each time you see a test car on the track or at the proving grounds, these with the small dog dish hubcaps has always been this 856 car. If it's wheel covers, it won't be the test mule car. Now, this is the experimental test mule car 856 after it received the donor body from EX52 or 852, or excuse me, I'm 853, the second show car. Now there's a common misnomer out there that the experimental cars, the two show cars, were stand-ins for the production line June 30th, 1953. Well, that is not the case. These cars were production cars on June 30th. Carl Jurema was working the assembly plant in Flint, and he met up with John Ambwert in 1978. And he was explaining to John that it was, they felt quite an accomplishment by meeting a desired completion date that Harlow Red Curtis had set out for getting the first production car built by the end of June. And he said, not only did we get one car built, but we got two cars built. And that was both ended up being 3950 and 3951. At any rate, these cars were not stand-ins of the two Motorama show cars. However similar the Motorama cars or the experimental cars look to the production cars, they are vastly different. If you look at the various different layouts, can you bring up the pictures? I can. Rex has put together some nice comparison pictures of production versus experimental. And see it. I guess what we ought to do is just open it up for question and answer period, and we'll just go from there and see if we can come up with something that's
We've heard, I've seen the pictures of your car and it has a lowered floor pan on it. And it does look like that probably came from the factory. That was not Bubba who just, kind of chopped and cut something up. Can you tell us more about that and how that came to be and what?
Okay. Maybe I should set a little bit of a stage here. I was aware of this car for a lot of years. There were some peculiarities to it. And the most outstanding peculiarity is that you bring up, Bill, and that's the lowered floor. The floors had been cut out beneath the seat on both sides, and One account talked about trap doors being cut in the floor of the car. It wasn't trap doors at all. One account talked about aluminum plates, not so. It was molded fiberglass panels that were custom molded and made to graft into the floor of the car. And it was on the particular General Motors document, it calls for the seating being too high, and it said free A point, 3/4 of an inch, and lower seat bolster 1.25 inches. So it gave 2 inches of lowering the seat, and that's what the lower cutout section in the floor was. I can't present photographs of, maybe I can. I'm not particularly prepared for this. I thought we were going to have it all on the monitor so that we could show it right off, and it's just not happening. I don't have those photos right here like I thought I did. Sorry, folks.
There is those other versions, right, that we have the other, if they watch the other videos that we've done, those pictures are in there.
Yeah, those pictures. Bill, you've seen those pictures, have you not?
I did. One of your friends showed me, he was out at your house, I think, and the guy that has that unrestored 53 in Tulsa, and showed me the pictures. It was very clear that it was not something that Bubba had done. This was pretty clear that this was some kind of a factory modification, because the drop by 3/4 of an inch or so was very, very uniform. It was clearly a pre-molded piece of fiberglass that created that very uniform drop, almost like a bread tray had been molded. The bottom of the floor pan had been cut out in a Wonder Bread bread tray had been essentially grafted in. It was very uniform.
Yeah, I thought I'd sent you all of those pictures and a description of it all. I think I've shared, Lynn, I believe I've shared those with you.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you're aware of those. At any rate, this is in a document dated July 29th, 1953. And this is a document that invites, this is to advise the following items will be shown for approval on Corvette car number 3950 at 9 a.m. Friday, July 31st at the experimental garage. And what they did is they invited a host of engineers to previously look car number 3950 over. That's car number one, and pick out the items that you don't like, that where it makes the car fall short of being a satisfactory production automobile. Well, they came up with a host of items that needed to be corrected. And as those items got corrected, those engineers were invited back to the experimental garage to take a look at what the corrections were. And they would analyze things from there and decide whether or not they were going to implement these changes into production or forget about them as to whether or not they were important enough to continue on with. But line number 10 says, free seat, front seat bolster lowered 1.25 inches and free A point lowered 3/4 of an inch. Well, I questioned what that was, and I contacted a retired design staff engineer, and he told me that A point was the platform that the seat sat on, in essence, the floorboard. That was the reason for that section to have been cut out and lowered beneath each seat, both driver and passenger side. There were another complaint that was very trivial that they did correct. They didn't like the unsightly rivets showing in the license plate display recess of the trunk lid. There are 4 or 6 rivets, I don't even remember how many, that you can see the rivet heads down through the glass lens for the rear license plate. And the engineers chose that as a problematic item to be corrected. The one item that I was confused about car number 3950 or 001 is it had a second design gas filler cavity. The gas filler door was late 53, early 54, 55 style. You would typically expect it to be the first design where when you raise the gas filler lid, it folds into the recess of the gas filler box cavity in the quarter panel. When in fact, this car, you raise it and it lifts up and over the top of the quarter panel, giving better access to the gas filler cap. Well, I managed to get the work order that called out for that change. And that is this work order here. And I've highlighted what it says. It says gas tank filler box and proposed hinge cover built in unit in Corvette 3950. This confirms work already completed on car 3950. Well, that was what was the reconciling point for me to realize what it was, why that later style gas filler cavity was in this car. But it's all comprised of very early cloth hand-laid fiberglass, this refined component. Now, people have asked me, what made you think that it was an early car? And I said, well, without any documents or anything in front of you, what conclusions can you draw from just looking at the car? And I think you can walk up to the car and I think we can conclusively say, well, that's an early Corvette. And I think we're in agreement there. I think we can move on and say it's a 53 to 55 Corvette. I think we're in agreement there. Well, let's look at the fiberglass composite and layout, and it's hand-laid fiberglass. If it's hand-laid fiberglass, it's probably an early 54 or 53 Corvette. Well, let's take a look at the rear bulkhead back by the rear cross member, where the rear spring shackles work into that rear bulkhead. They're generally considered the first 70 or 80 cars had a flat rear bulkhead in the back and did not have relief for the spring shackles to work as the rear springs flex up and down and extended. And they redesigned the rear spring arrangement as well. So with that, we can safely draw a conclusion that it's a 53 Corvette, probably 80 or earlier. Well, let's take another look at things here. We've got a one-piece hand-laid floor pan composite that's generally considered within the first dozen cars. I think there's overlap. I think that I don't know if we've decided for certain. Lynn, is your 19, car number 19, is that a one-piece floor pan?
Yes, it is. Yes.
And that's the latest car that I know of in my surveying of it being that late of a car. But I'm aware of car number 14, car number 13, car number 12, car number 11, car number 9, car number 8, car number, what I think is car number 7, car number 6, 5, 4, 3, and 2, and now 1. And those are the possibilities, leaving possibilities of a one-piece floor pan that's not claimed as car number 10 or maybe 17. I haven't found anything on 17. But it narrows it down, and then you look at these work orders, and that was the smoking gun for me. And I shared all of this stuff with John Antwerp. This was a project that was initiated by John and I doing research on potentially putting together a publication that gets the early Corvette history recorded correctly. And so with that, this car ended up being a kind of a byproduct of that. Questions, does anybody have any specific questions that they wanted to ask about this?
I have a question if I could, please.
Yes.
Were any production Corvettes two-piece formed floor pans and joined under the seats?
Oh, as far as like a front to rear splice, they were segmented together. Typically, this one piece hand laid floor pan was too large and too bulky to work with. So they molded up wheelhouses for the rear. They molded up a spare tire well tub, a trunk front bulkhead, two rocker rails, outboard rails, and the center transmission tunnel. They set those in a jig and laid out, hand laid, in essence, fiberglass band-aids for the floor treads in front and piecing the trunk together. And that's how they constructed the floor pan after that first run of one-piece hand-laid deals on those early cars. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Were they ever press molded, or if so, when did that come into being?
Later on, they even incorporated that lowered floor pan feature that they did on 3950. They didn't duplicate it exactly, but they did lower the floor pan about the same amount. And I believe that started about the time that flipper moldings went away for the convertible top design. That would have been mid-late 54. I'm going to have to look at more cars. I did not ever notice that the floors had been lowered until I got this car. I got these documents and I learned all of this stuff. And then I started studying other cars that I have or components of other cars that I have. And I have a back half of the body that has a lower floor configuration that is a late 54 or 55 rear clip. And yes, they eventually went to mated mold parts.
Full press molding definitely occurred about mid-production in 54 for all parts.
You are correct, Lynn. Yes. And wouldn't you know it, John Antwerp's calling me now.
Put it on speakerphone. We got questions.
Mr. Antwerp? You are listening in to a Zoom call right now with the chapters across the nation. And so okay, and got you on speakerphone. So if you want to tell anybody anything, be careful how you word it.
See you later.
Goodbye. Thanks, John. I'll call you later.
Be careful who's calling when.
Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
So with that modification you're talking about, might that have occurred between, say, Steve and my cars? I can't remember what number Steve's car is. Mine
It could have,
33, 35.
it could have happened. It was mid 54. I don't have the exact time frame of evolution on 54 stuff, you know.
I just know there's easy examples to look at.
Right, right. Anything else that's pertinent for anybody?
Corey, explain about the steering wheel column elevation.
Okay, there was prior, Car 3950 and 3953 were slated to go to White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, to the Greenbrier Resort for the announcement of the all-new 54 Corvette. And it's interesting to me that 3950 and 3953 were the two cars chosen to represent the all-new 54 Corvette, and this was September of the year, if I'm not mistaken, or late summer at any rate. And you've got the first and the seventh Corvette ever made, and this is the four. It almost lends to believe that maybe a little false advertising, but maybe not. At any rate, this car 3950 was called in to get more knee room. The engineers were complaining that when you climb into the car, there's not enough room to get your leg between the seat and the steering wheel and get sat down. So with that, they obviously lowered the seat earlier on. There were apparently still complaints about it. So what they did is that they sent it back to engineering, and they elongated the dash hole for the steering column to protrude through, and they relieved the firewall hole for the mast jacket to come up a bit. And it was raised up the better part of an inch. But the interesting thing about it, I have comparison pictures that you can't see because they're not easy for me to bring up here on the computer, but I will get them out to you guys. The Opel series cars had the steering column positioned nearly a full inch higher in the dash than the production cars did. That's why the engineers who were familiar with the Corvette experimental cars were onto it right away that this wasn't acceptable in the production car. And so they sent it off prior to that run down to White Sulphur Springs. Zora Duntov drove 3950. Mari Rose drove car number 3953. Lauren Lundberg reached out to the librarian in White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia, and got the newspaper articles of the then presentation of the all-new Corvette back in the fall of '53. And I have those newspaper clippings. If anybody is interested, I can share those with you.
Yes, please, absolutely.
Yeah. I will have to get them out to you. I've got them in my phone and in my computer, but I don't know how. I'm not tech savvy enough to put it on a Zoom call. So anything else I can present, gentlemen?
Corey, I had kind of a follow-up question to Mike Murray's on the one-piece floor pan. So I kind of followed the understanding that you had a transmission tunnel and you had the rear wheel wells. Those were separate pieces, and then they kind of glued them all together. That was not a one-piece floor plan, is what I'm understanding. Then I'm assuming the one-piece floor plan is it was literally just great big sheets of fiberglass that made the floor plan, the tunnel, and the rear wheel wells and the trunk part.
Tire well, everything, yes. Yes.
And how do you tell whether one's is a multi-piece that's been patched together, which is the more modern, more common approach, versus the one piece? How do you tell?
Merely by looking at it, Bill. If you search the first Corvettes being built video, have you watched that? Okay, if you watch as they're laying those components in that floor pan jig, it's probably the mold that they initially used when they molded everything all in one. But they put these segmented pieces in the mold first and then tied those together subsequently. And that's how those were. If you will tell by looking at them, the next time you get to Lynn's place, you might look underneath his car, his number 19, and verify that it is a one-piece body, but you'll be able to see the separation line between the floor tunnel and the floor treads and the rockers. And you'll also be able to tell in the trunk around the spare tire well area. And the one-piece hand-laid floor pans are very crude, very crude.
Just to add to that, Corey, the surface against the mold is smooth. So on a one-piece floor pan, the underside is actually very smooth. And the top side, which would be the floor of the trunk and the floor of the passenger compartment, is very, very rough. So you have a rough surface with a smooth surface on against the mold. And then as you got to component molding, you actually had two molds. You ended up with a smooth surface on both sides. And that would be, then you notice the fiberglass bandages, which hook those together, which would be rough in between them. So as that progressed, yep.
Yeah.
What time did that take place?
You know, it's interesting when you watch the first Corvettes being made, you actually see some beige top Corvettes coming out of that shop. So that had to be towards the end of 53 production, I'd imagine. So it's honestly uncertain when that all came about. It probably was a slow transition.
And then carried into 54.
Yep.
Let me
Was the matting used all the burlap type?
Yeah. Everything was of the cloth.
The video you speak of, Lynn, I think those are coverings over black tops, not beige tops.
Oh, that's interesting. I was wondering about that. Yeah.
That's what I think it is, because I looked at that too and I questioned it and I watched it and watched it and watched it. And that's what I think, but you might verify that too, Lynn.
Yeah, there's one black top you can see there, and I said, oh, the other ones don't look black.
Yeah, but I think that was a protective covering of sorts
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and some of those early component built floor pans were hand laid pieces that were weren't mated mold too, but like it shows them a mated mold for a top or a spare tire well and trimming that and getting it ready to go for the assembly as well. Yeah. Yeah. Well, anything of true importance here, guys? I was going to do a visual of these images that we got out for comparison. Rex Marshall did a beautiful overlay of experimental cars versus production cars, and you can see the vast difference of design layout from that. But
Yes.
okay,
Go for it.
pictured here on the left is an experimental car, the one that has the Corvette nameplate above the grille. If you look at the grille configuration itself, the upper grille is arched very highly, and the production car is almost parallel with the lower grille. If you look at the grille ornaments, the grille teeth.
Ben is in trouble.
If you look at the grille teeth, these are position specific on the experimental car, shorter on top than they are on the bottom. And so each grille tooth has to go in its own position. On the production car, the left side, as you're working towards the left or the right, you flip them over and they work on the other side. So that was a streamline that they did for production cars. Now, if you look at the headlights on the experimental car are much, much smaller. The headlight bezels and screens, and obviously similar, but completely different. And if you subscribe to the notion that the first two cars were really experimental cars, it doesn't cut mustard because they are completely different in configuration. Let's move on to the next image. Now, Rex did an overlay of a production car versus an experimental car or a prototype car. Look at the difference. The large license plate is a production license plate. The small one is the prototype or the experimental car with the Corvette nameplate above it. Drastically different. They are not remotely the same. If you look there, on the left side is a production car steering wheel placement. On the right is the experimental or the prototype. But look at the steering wheel horizontal spoke in relationship to the controls and gauges in the dash. You're down probably an inch or two on the left one, which is production, and that much higher on the prototype car. And it's obvious that it's going to be difficult to get in and under the steering wheel of the production car and much easier on the prototype. Everybody see all of that?
And look at the intersect point between the V and the jewel there and the V and the jewel here.
Correct. Correct. Interesting point. That's okay. Next image. This is a picture of the lower dash. If you'll look how high the mast jacket protrudes out of the dash on the experimental car. See the difference there? This is my car here with the obviously the column out, but you can see the difference in the dashboard layout and configuration there. Now, this is a very interesting side view that Rex did an overlay of. This is prototype or experimental and production overlaid on top of it. The small door is the prototype or the experimental. The large door is the production door. Much difference in that. Obviously, the windshield brake will show that a little bit here coming up, but the windshield configuration is definitely different as well. That is
No, that's not. This, if we want to go to the windshield, that's the internet.
there we are. Now, the left is production, on the right is experimental, and you can see the difference of the rake on the windshield framework being drastically different. And even though the angle of the photograph is a little bit different, you can see how much higher the steering wheel is positioned in the prototype car than it is in the production car. Once again, dispelling the myth that they were stand-in cars for the production line on June 30th.
To pinpoint the.
Oh, okay. This is one of the experimental cars, 852 or 853, I don't know. But it shows a lock on the
Lock there, and then the long it's there for
the flipper molding. Right,
that is
right.
longer because the doors are shorter.
Yes.
There, once again, the lock with the key in it. And of importance is the one-piece dash.
Without a removable eyebrow off the dash.
And once again, one-piece dash.
And you've got your shell that the cushions are placed in. And there's a production line photograph that are obviously 100% production cars. If you look at the grille teeth, if you look at the grille opening, if you look at the headlights, if you look at the little flipper molding distances, if you look at the removable dash rail, it shows quite vividly. Most assuredly, a production car does not have a lock in the convertible top deck lid. Production cars, not experimentals. Now, there's a picture of Zora catching air in 856 after December of 1953, because that is the post body swap from 853 to 856. That is the second show car body on the test mule car. Now, the interesting thing about that is if you subscribe to the notion that those production cars or those prototype cars were entered into the production line and outfitted with production trim, and then why would they change from production trim on 853 to give the body to 856 so it's back into experimental trim? Reason why is it didn't happen. They just stayed true to form as the cars were built. How many of you guys have questioned, Bill, you made mention of the fire test, the first two cars were burned. Has anybody ever come up with any kind of documentation to back that up? Because I've been looking now for 20 years and haven't come up with anything. The only burn test that I have is on car number 852. The body was removed from 852. The chassis was sent to styling to be stretched for the Nomad build, and the body was sent out to the proving grounds for a burn test. This burn test is documented step by step, minute by minute, in the article that John Ambler wrote back in 1993. If you haven't read the article, you should. Vinny republished that article in 2018, and it's very, very good and worth reading.
I did read, I just got it this morning from Vinny. I was reading it. It does pretty clearly indicate that there was just one car in the burn test, and that probably makes logical sense now that you think about it. Why the hell would you burn two cars when you only got to burn one to find out whether or not you needed this anti-flame additive to the fiberglass compound? But if anybody wants that article, I do have it. You can send me an email and I'll send it to you. I haven't read the whole thing, but the burn test does indicate pretty clearly to me, at least, there was just one car burned.
Well, you raised a pretty good point, Bill. It was actually, as I understand it, from what I've read, that it was a comparison test. And there was a burn of the regular fiberglass. I don't know if it was just a piece, several parts, a partial assembly, or a whole car. And then the actual burn car had the fire retardant added to it. And the message from the people that tested it said it would cost $60 more per car to add that. And that was poo-poo. They didn't do it. Is there any truth to that?
It was $6 a car, and they didn't think they needed to waste that kind of money.
Won't even buy you a cup of coffee now.
Exactly. But there was one and only one burn test, and it was confined to car number 852, and it had 111 miles on the odometer when they took it apart for this change out.
Oh, so they didn't burn the complete car. They just may have burned sections of it.
They burned the body. And if you read the article, it will tell you what they burned and how they burned it and how much gasoline they had to add to it to get it to burn. They tried shorting out electrical systems to get it to ignite. It did not work. So they went ahead and they put accelerant on, and that did work.
Cool.
Yeah. Read the article. You will like it. You will really like it.
Well, great. I'll look forward to it.
Yes.
I'll send you the article, Mike. I just got it. I haven't read the whole thing, but that is in the beginning, and it does pretty, as far as I've read, it does indicate to me so far pretty clearly that just one car was burned. And it does kind of exactly as Corey said, they stripped everything off of it that didn't matter, like the convertible top and some other things. They stripped it off, and then they just burned the car on the body or on the chassis.
No, they did
Um,
not, Bill. It was not
Was-
burned on the chassis. It was removed from the chassis. The chassis was sent off to styling to be stretched for the Nomad, and it was assigned 857 for that project. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay. And I didn't read it I'm just reading through it, Corey, so.
yeah. Well, at any rate, it's very descriptive. It is one and only one burn. But if anybody does come up with documents of other cars that were burned, I would love to see them, as would John Agwell. We were talking about that just a couple of days ago.
Well, if they wouldn't add $6 per car, they wouldn't bother to pay to burn another one.
Yeah, good point. They wouldn't waste that kind of money. Yeah.
Well, you think about it, $6 a car, they were supposed to produce 10,000 cars in 54, that's $60,000. You'd pretty simple math tells you you're gonna burn one car for sure. The only reason I'd maybe burn a second car is to be absolutely certain that, oh, the first one, maybe I do need it, the second one, oh, I don't need it, but the article is pretty long. It tells you that it took a long time for this car to burn. So to me, at least indicates on the initial read that, hey, I saved $60,000 by burning one body. That makes real mathematical sense. And it took, as Corey pointed out, it took one heck of a long time for that body to burn with. They did a lot of things to make it actually burn, a lot. Corey knows it better than me.
Yeah, there's about 3 pages of time frame, and they started the process at 7:15 in the AM, and they finally complete collapse of body by 11 o'clock, I believe. Yeah.
Really, it burned that long?
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yes. And it says it's too fine a print, and I don't have my glasses to read this, but it's a step-by-step account of what they encountered. Let's see.
Well, I can see that probably justify not having to invest another $6 a car if it took that long to burn.
Yeah, they said it was much safer than a steel body. It says the consensus of the proving ground observers is that the reinforced plastic body is superior in resistance of fire than a conventional steel body. So that's how they assessed it. I don't know how they light steel on fire easier than they do fiberglass, but that's what their closing comment was on that document.
Amazing. Yeah, you could probably find a garden hose within 3.5 hours.
Yeah. It says rags immersed in gasoline were stuffed in the tool storage compartment in the right side of the luggage compartment and flame applied. Now that should ignite a fire on a fiberglass car, and they did manage to get it to burn pretty readily there. That was in the last page of the burn down document. But this is all spelled out in that 1993 and 2018 article that was written by John Ambwort back then. Vinny called me and asked what would be a nice tribute to John Ambwort for the 25 years of his service. And I said, I think publishing that story again would be appropriate. And Vinny thought it would really be good because it was 25 years to the day on the issue. It's good. You'll like reading it, I guarantee.
Cool stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think we've probably covered what we can cover in relatively short order. We've gone over the allotted time that Alan wanted to designate for today's Bonneville chapter meeting. Perhaps I can be better prepared with visual aids coming up if we do other stuff, or perhaps Steve and I will just sit down and do another video presentation like the previous ones that Steve's just a marvelous editor of when I stumble and don't talk. He can get that squared away for us. Anything anybody wants to ask in particular?
Thank you very much, Corey, and Steve for putting this together. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate you too, Bill. You all have a delightful evening and those of you,
Sincere appreciation for all the research you've done on this subject of the very early Corvettes. I mean, that's a huge amount of research. It really, really is, and it's appreciated.
well, thank you, Lynn. I appreciate that. And you've contributed a tremendous amount to that research project for me, and I thank you too.
Mutual.
Well, great stuff. Thank you very much. Great fun. I learned a lot.
Yeah.